If you want to try macro photography, but you're reluctant to spend, say, $500 or $1,000, or in the case of this beast, the Hasselblad X2D, $5,000 on a dedicated macro lens, then in this video I'm going to show you how you can get fantastic results on the Hasselblad for as little as $120, and on a full frame camera like the R6 Mark II that I'm filming with here, as little as $40. Now, I've been a photographer for over 40 years, many of those years professionally shooting for magazines and clients. But I've dabbled in macro photography from time to time, and I find that macro photography is one of the most relaxing forms of photography that you can do. And the good thing is you can do it without even leaving home. You can do it very close to your neighborhood or even in your backyard, because unlike the grand vistas that we seek in landscape photography, the macro world is everywhere. You can operate in a really small radius, and you can do that for hours and hours and just enjoy the fascinating world that exists beneath our feet. And the images that some people get are just astonishing. Take a look at some of the photos here from fellow YouTuber Peter Varag. They're just amazing. Now, as I mentioned, I've been shooting for decades, but the bulk of my photography has been cars, motorcycles, landscapes, people, that kind of stuff. I've done macro photography from time to time, but nowhere near as often as the other genres. But lately I've had real trouble getting out. My work schedule has just been insane. Unlike a lot of other YouTubers, I'm still full-time working for clients. And so I haven't been able to get out anywhere near as much as I have in the past. So recently I decided to give macro photography another go, because it still gets me outside, wandering about in the bush, in nature. It's kind of the same thing, but on a smaller scale. And it's something that I can do much closer to home, or in the case of this video, at my dad's home when I went visiting recently. And if I recall the times that I have done macro photography in the past, it's always been a really peaceful, slow, and meditative experience. But this time I decided to dip my toes back into the macro world on the cheap. Instead of spending $5,000 on a 120mm XCD lens for my Hasselblad, or say $1,000, I'm talking US dollars here by the way, on a Canon 100mm macro lens for my R6 Mark II, instead I spent $120 on this 48mm photo diox extension tube for my Hasselblad, and $40 on two Mikey, I'm not sure, extension tubes for my Canon R6 Mark II. Now, if you don't know what extension tubes are, they essentially look like stubby little lenses, except these don't have any glass in them. See, they're completely hollow. But most of them, like the ones I have here, do have contacts on them to pass on focus and aperture data to the camera body. So in many cases, attaching extension tubes to your camera don't really impede its basic function at all. All they do is extend the space between your camera lens, which you attach to the extension tube, and then you attach the extension tube to your camera. What they do is they extend the space between the lens and the sensor and the camera body. And what this does is it reduces the lens's minimum focus distance, so you can get closer to your subject, and it also magnifies the subject so it appears larger in the frame. Now, to round out this exercise, Kent Faith sent me a lovely geared head for my tripod, so that I could adjust things with millimeter precision. I mean, when you're shooting macro and your subject is only a few millimeters tall, then any movement at all of the camera and the lens obviously attached to it can appear like feet or meters at the other end on the sensor. So if you've ever tried shooting macro or anything really close up with a ball head, you'll know that it can drive you insane. If you're trying to do anything with any degree of precision, a ball head is not the option that you want. You want a geared head. And this little one was quite lovely, actually. It's beautifully made, very, very precise, and it was a joy to use. So on a recent trip to my dad's house, I tried out the Mikey extension tubes on the R6 and the photodiox extension tube on the Hasselblad X2D, just to see if this might keep me happy during these periods where I'm just too bloody busy to go out and shoot landscapes or cars. Now, as luck would have it, one of my favourite lens manufacturers, TTArtisan, sent me this thing, which is beautifully made, like all of their lenses, really beautifully made. This is a 100mm f2.8 dedicated macro lens for, in this particular case, for the Canon RF system. And it is a beautiful lens. And I can tell you right now, the results that I got from this thing are bloody impressive. It is a really, really nice lens. I love this thing. Yeah, one of my fondest memories shooting landscapes was many years ago. I think I was about 12 or 13 years old, camping with my dad up in the high country, which we did an awful lot when I was a teenager growing up. And I'd just gotten properly into photography. I had my first proper SLR camera, a Ricoh XRP, and I had a macro lens for it. I can't remember what it was, but I remember spending hours wandering around the campsite one afternoon with this camera and lens combination and just getting down close to the little world that existed there in the forest. And even now I can remember just how relaxing and beautiful that was, which was great for an anxious teenager to just sort of settle into something that was really enjoyable and immersive. And now that I'm an anxious middle-aged man with an increasingly full schedule, I was kind of hoping that I would get a similar experience doing this at my dad's house. And I have to say I did. It was lovely just to sit there in his bonsai garden and just look at the world in miniature. It was lovely. Now, as you can see here, I'm not doing anything fancy. I have no external light source and I'm not focus stacking my images. All I want to do is see how easy these extension tubes are to use on my full frame camera and medium format camera. And I want to try out this lovely Kent Faith geared head, and if possible, come away with at least one macro image that I like. Because if that happens, then it might assuage my frustration with not getting away to shoot landscapes as often as I'd like. Okay, so basically the way this works is this. You grab the lens that you want to use, and I recommend something at least 50mm or up, because you don't want to be getting so close to your subject that you bash your lens into the subject. You attach the lens that you want to use to the extension tube, like that, simple as that, and then you attach the extension tube to the camera, like that, simple. Now there's a couple of other reasons why you don't want to use too wide a lens on an extension tube, or for macro photography in general. One is that you can end up getting that close to your subject that you end up blocking the source of the light or creating a shadow on your subject. And the other one is if you're shooting something that's skittish like insects, well then if you get too close you're going to scare them away. Now when it comes to blocking the light, there are dedicated macro flash setups that you can get, and you'll see the setup that Peter Virag uses over on his channel if you choose to go over there. So that can mitigate that problem, but still when it comes to other subjects that might be scared by the presence of you and your camera, you don't want to get too close to them if you can avoid it. The difference between your minimum focus distance and your maximum focus distance is going to be bugger all. It's going to probably be measured in centimetres. Unlike shooting without an extension tube, your minimum and maximum focus distance could be, say a metre for your minimum focus distance and infinity at maximum focus distance. That won't be the case when you put an extension tube on an existing lens. Now, if you shoot with a dedicated macro lens, like this TTArtisan that I mentioned, well then that's a different story. They're designed from the outset to operate as both a macro lens and a normal lens, if you want to call it that. So something like the 100mm is a fantastic lens for a couple of things, because you can use this for macro photography and it's awesome at that. You could also use this as a portrait lens, and it's an f2.8 lens, so that still gives you a nice blurred background, and the bokeh on this is lovely. You could use it for product photography, so it has lots of different uses. But extension tubes really reduce the distance between minimum and maximum focus distance. So what you tend to do is you tend to get within range of what you want to photograph, adjust your focus, and then you will move the camera in or out a little bit to finalize your focus. But all of that to say, what really matters is the results, right? So what sort of results did I get? Well, with the Canon and the extension tubes on that, I was using Canon's RF 24-105 f4 to 7.1 lens, and the results I would describe as fine. I think for most people, it's probably good enough. If you used say a faster prime lens like a 51.8 or anything that's a prime lens with a fast maximum aperture, then the results would probably be even better. As for the Hasselblad, that was pretty impressive. I mean, you've got 100 megapixels to play with. You've got incredible dynamic range. The difference between minimum and maximum focus distance is peanuts once you put this big 48mm extension tube on it. You can get smaller ones than this, and that would probably make more sense. But still, the results I got from that, I'm really happy with. I'll show you those now. And that leaves the TTArtisan 100mm dedicated macro lens. This is $320 at the moment, US dollars, compared to, yes, only $40 for the Mikey extension tubes. I mean, that's cheap as you like, that's incredibly cheap. But with this, you get a dedicated macro lens that is incredibly sharp, beautifully made, all metal construction. You've got a fantastic portrait lens, you've got a great product photography lens. You can use this for all sorts of stuff. Yes, it's manual focus only. It's not an autofocus lens. But it's got a f2.8 maximum aperture, and it is just a lovely thing to use. It's got mounting points here for flashes, lights, and that sort of stuff, so that you can really set it up for macro photography. I think this thing is a bargain. I think for a full-frame mirrorless camera user, I would much prefer to use something like this than extension tubes. I mean, if you're only going to dabble and you just want to have a go at macro photography and see if it interests you and see if it's something that you want to do more of, then this is a great first step. These extension tubes are definitely a very cheap and effective way of having a crack at macro photography. And of course, with the Hasselblad, you know, your options are spend $5,000 US on a dedicated macro lens or try the extension tube. And I highly recommend this. This works brilliantly on the X2D, and I think the results speak for themselves. But anyway, that's what I reckon. I don't know what you reckon. I guess your budget and your level of interest in macro photography is going to determine what you do. That's my take on it. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. See ya.